for tuning in to the Illuminations Podcast. We love having you here. It is our mission to be a beacon of light on your journey towards conscious and mindful living. In our weekly episode, we bring you inspiring change makers in the field of spirituality, healing, personal growth, and wellness who share their insight and expertise so you can navigate your way to a happier, healthier, and more purposeful life.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Illuminations Podcast. And I'm your host, Nia. I am a clinical hypnotherapist, yoga teacher, and sound therapist here. And we are back with another episode with another speaker. And we have an exciting and very, very interesting topic today. It's called the hype around meditation and mindfulness apps to overcome stress and anxiety. And to talk to me about this topic, I have a very special guest. Her name is Annabel Lynch. Annabel is a psychotherapist and coach specialized in women's well-being. She uses an integrative approach that incorporates a range of scientific methodologies and techniques from Western psychology and well-being science, such as cognitive behavioral therapy and positive psychology, combined with philosophies and healing practices from the East, such as mind-body therapies and mindfulness meditation. So why not have Annabel on the show today to talk about this very specific topic? Because I think everyone knows that stress and anxiety is such a big part of our lives right now. And a lot of people are turning either towards medication or towards better practices like meditation or mindfulness. But a lot of the times people don't know where to start. So they often go down the route of downloading an app and going with it. But how do we know if that is the right way? How do we know if it's effective? So let's just find that out. Let's just talk about it. So first of all, let me just invite you onto the show, Annabel. Thank you so much for coming on. It's such an honor and such a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm really excited to talk about this very interesting topic.
Yeah.
With you as well. I mean, like mindfulness is really, and meditation, it's really one of the most incredible things that we can do for our overall well-being. I mean, the benefits are numerous. So we're talking about, better sleep, improved well-being, less stress, less anxiety, less depression.
Yeah.
A completely different life experience that people are unable to experience, feeling more grounded, feeling more connected, feeling more engaged with the present, enhances your relationships. Like, honestly, the benefits are so numerous. It's just really one of the most effective tools that I've ever worked with. And it's really a pleasure for me to teach it to my patients and to my clients as well.
Absolutely. And I can imagine even the name, that mindfulness and meditation, they sound great, but oftentimes I feel like people don't really know what's the difference. So do you mind clarifying that? So what's the difference between meditation and what's the difference between mindfulness?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, there's many types of meditation. We can do silent meditations, we can do focused meditations, we can do various relaxation techniques as well. A lot of the time when we're meditating, someone might say to you, just watch your thoughts. Mm-hmm. That can sound quite complicated to a beginner. Mm-hmm. How does someone even know what that means? Whereas what's incredible about mindfulness is it's not really a meditation in that sense. It's more of a form of attention. So what we're doing is we're paying attention in the present moment. So what does that look like? It looks like, what can I see around me in the room? What can I hear in the room and outside of the room? What can I feel? What can I taste? What can I smell? And that's a really easy type of meditation for people to do because they can really just connect into their environment.
So if I were to ask you, because as you explain, as you tell me about that, of course that makes sense. Yeah. But now in my head, I'm thinking, but that sounds so boring. Why would I want to do that? So can you tell us why is that important and how does that really help and what does that do to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just in terms of if it seems boring, it's also when you step into the exercise, it can help you to let go of some of those feelings of boredom, because you're really enjoying what's around you. It might be, there's some sounds that you can hear, maybe you're having a walk and there's things on your walk that you haven't noticed, the lady walking past with the dog, maybe you see a new building. So I think that can bring a bit of a sense of, adventure and excitement in that way. And then in terms of, what are some of the benefits of doing that? I mean, we all know how much time we spend in our own minds.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes a horrible place, thinking about the past, things, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't done that. This shouldn't have happened. That shouldn't have happened.
We go down into a downward spiral.
And what happens when we do that is that we start to feel bad and we start to feel sad.
Exactly.
And the opposite of that is that we can be worried about the future, thinking, what's going to happen tomorrow? How am I going to do, in this interview, or, what about my presentation for work? And, that causes a lot of feelings of stress and anxiety, this forward and future thinking. But when we take our time to step out of that and do this mindfulness exercise, slowly the thoughts will go away and they lose their meaning and they lose their power over you.
So this mindfulness would work best for people or in situations where you are just drowning in your thoughts, perhaps negative thoughts, and you feel like you can't get out of it. So are you saying mindfulness is almost like a circuit breaker to bring you back into the present, to keep you grounded so that you can create fresh thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, in terms of creating fresh thoughts, we might change our perspective on what we're seeing. But again, what mindfulness does is it just gives us that ability to to detach. So for many people, they don't really realize that they're not their thoughts. And, they don't realize that they can step out of that and just allow them to pass. And then as a result of that, they'll start to feel better. So the form of paying attention to the moment and being really present slowly will start to show people that they can disconnect from that, and their thoughts aren't controlling them, and they do have power and they do have presence, and they can overcome that sense of worry that they can get.
So how do the meditation or mindfulness apps these days come into the picture? Let's start with, are they effective?
Yeah.
And how are they helping?
Wonderful. I mean, that's such an interesting topic and a great question. So, I mean, the mindfulness apps, I mean, we could often also say that, they're the opposite of mindfulness because, we talk about coming away from our busy lives and always being distracted.
Yeah.
So it can sound, a bit of a cliche that, we're going to be on our phones all the time practicing being mindful. So, I mean, how does that actually work? So the mindfulness apps, they can be helpful in some instances. So for example, Headspace and Calm, what they do is they have guided meditations on there that teach people how to let go of stress and anxiety. So a daily practice of something like this can be quite helpful for some people if they stick to it. However, what I would say is missing with these apps is they don't have a lot of the nuances that you would necessarily get from working with a mindfulness teacher. So things like when we teach mindfulness, we work on things called attitudes of mindfulness. So acceptance is a really big thing that we want to work on. So, so while we have these thoughts and while we have these distressing emotions, we want to really work on accepting that, because what you resist persists. So the more that we push it away, the more it's going to be there. So we want to just accept that it's there. I feel this way and I'm having these thoughts. That's there, but there's also so much more around me. There's the environment and everything that's happening in life, and my soul and my spirit, and these things are also there. So I'm not sure how much of a sense of that type of mindfulness you can get from an application.
Yeah, I love, absolutely, because I feel like you've given us a lot of things, a lot of powerful messages right now. So let's take it one at a time. So the first one. So talking about apps, right? And you just mentioned how apps are actually taking you. It's not really helping you become more mindful, right? So, but what I'm trying to say is, because of the lifestyles that we lead, it's almost like we can't separate them, and it is becoming part of our lifestyle. So would you say the downside of using an app is you are in a way being more attached to another element, something that's outside of yourself, where the whole point of mindfulness is to detach. So you're just adding another layer of attachment to detach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the issues with these apps is that they're directed meditations. So often what's happening is it isn't actually mindfulness. It's a form of a relaxation technique or a guided meditation.
So it's just to relax.
Yeah, it's just to relax. Whereas part of proper mindfulness training is called self-directed meditation, where you're actually in that space and it's you that's creating the agenda and you that's creating the experience.
Without the aid of
the aid of instruction or someone telling you what to do. And, that's being mindful because it's allowing your real thoughts and emotions to come through. And that's a big part of mindfulness.
And I love what you also mentioned about what you resist persists. And this is where the acceptance part of it comes in, because the minute you feel an extreme sense of negative emotion, let's say sadness or anger, I feel as human beings, we don't want to feel it. So we would try to run away from it. We would try to avoid it, distract ourselves and so on. And that is, again, not being mindful. So can you tell us a little bit about how do you first take the first steps into acceptance, therefore being more mindful?
Absolutely. So with acceptance and something, that you mentioned that was interesting, and when we have this form of avoidance, in a way, these mindfulness apps can become our avoidance because you're tuning in and listening to someone else and you're tuning into the voice. Yeah. How to start truly accepting how you feel is just to start really small. For some people, it might be, can I sit with my emotions for 10 to 15 seconds? Yeah. It's something you haven't done before. That's a really big thing. And allow yourself to feel comfortable with that. And, just understand that, especially in the case of stress or anxiety, just because it's there, it doesn't have to be a monster. It can be a smaller thing that's there in the room with you, but at the same time, you're able to experience other things, and just allowing yourself to feel just for that really short time. And then, over time, we could build that up to 30 seconds, a minute, 15 minutes, and then, you're completely comfortable allowing all expressions of emotions to come through.
And I think what you just said is so powerful, because sitting with your emotions, that takes a practice and courage, because it's extremely uncomfortable. And I think it's such a great tip that you just shared, that allowing yourself to just slowly increase that time. So starting with a minute, then 2 minutes, and 3 minutes, or 15 minutes, and so on. But like you said, it all comes down to allowing yourself to sit with that emotion first, right? Therefore, feeling it, allowing the discomfort, accepting the discomfort rather than running away.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so interesting how technology or apps or whatever, for whatever reasons we use our phones for, we use it for distraction, to be distracted. And it's so interesting to me how, even though the intention of these mindfulness apps is great and is to help people, what it's indirectly doing is just the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just, that time of being on your device, you think you're having a mindful moment with your Headspace app, but, the temptation to check your emails has suddenly increased because your phone's in your hand.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really give you that full time out and that full sense of mindfulness, which, you get from sitting in a room on your own and, having a self-directed practice.
So can you tell us a little bit about perhaps cases you worked with or personal stories where mindfulness has helped you?
Yeah, absolutely. So just in terms of, working with people. So one of the most effective things that we can use mindfulness for is stress and anxiety.
Okay.
And for example, panic attacks. So for a lot of people, when their anxiety is so high, they can get themselves into this state of panic. So there's mindfulness techniques that we can use to help them in the moment. So there's something that it's incredible. It's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have you heard of it? Yeah. So, they look around the room and have a look at 5 things they can see, and then 4 things they can hear, 3 things they can feel, touch and smell.
Wow. So using your 5 senses.
Yeah, using your 5 senses and really stepping into that. So that enables people to come out of that stressful sense of panic, all of the body sensations that are happening. So, in terms of treating stress and anxiety, that's something that's very effective. I've used mindfulness to completely change people's, sense of being.
Wow.
People can go through a really deep sense of transformation, evolution, and their self-awareness can increase. Their self-regulation increases. They're able to see the world as it truly is, as opposed to through the lens of stress and anxiety.
That's so true.
Yeah. So while, we can use it, as a quick fix in a lot of situations, we can also use it over a couple of years to create deep change and transformation.
And I think, just like what you said, it all comes down to self-regulation, right?
Yeah,
because one thing that's definitely certain is you can never control your environment. You can never control situations. However, you can control the way you respond to it. Yeah. And this is where the self-regulation comes in, right?
Yes, absolutely. And again, that's another benefit of mindfulness, is it gives us that separation. There's a bit of space between the stimulus and how you're reacting, or, you get triggered and then you're reacting. Whereas when you're mindful, there's a space there to choose.
So
to choose regulation, to choose a different reaction.
So that space that you're talking about, how can we start practicing mindfulness to create that space? And because you mentioned the 5 4 3 2 1 5 4 3 2 1 technique, and that helps you become aware. How do we now then zone in to that space and create that separation when you are experiencing the stress and anxiety in that very moment? How do you then just snap out of it?
Yeah, so actually using that exercise would help you to snap out of that. There's another thing that we can do, which is mindfulness of the breath.
Okay.
So really focus on the breathing, breathing into your belly and breathing out. And what that also does is it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's actually the opposite of the stress response. So it's actually activating your body's natural heal, rest and relax response, which is something really incredible. Not a lot of people know that they can activate that consciously.
Wow.
It's to do with the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing to do, would be to focus on the breath.
That makes so much sense, because that's exactly what we do when we're doing, let's say, yoga. When we're slowing down the breath, it's immediately activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and that naturally calms you down. Because I remember a teacher of mine told me the number of thoughts you have is directly related to the number of breaths you take per minute.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, and he gave me a little bit of perspective. He was saying the Tibetan monks take an average of 6 breaths per minute, and people who aren't monks or who aren't doing these mindfulness practices, they take about 12 to 15 breaths per minute.
Of course, it makes a lot of sense.
And that's insane. And that just shows how our lifestyles are affecting our thoughts and the way we are, but also how much control we have over our thoughts.
That's the thing. And that's one of the benefits of mindfulness. It educates people to understand how much control they actually have over their own mind and body.
Absolutely.
If you're just activating these simple practices, we're able to really change, our physiology, our stress response, put our body into a relaxed state. Yeah, it's really interesting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what would you say are some tips you have for people who are currently facing stress and anxiety? What are some lifestyle changes or certain tips that you can share?
Yeah, so the obvious one is to practice mindfulness.
Yeah.
Daily practice. So even 5 to 10 minutes can make a really big difference.
How often during the day?
Ideally once. It depends. One of the keys with this is that it really needs to be able to fit into their schedule as well. If it's going to cause more stress and anxiety to take time off work to do it, then that's not really...
Then you're not going to want to do it.
No, you're not going to want to do it. So it's also about fitting it into your daily life. It's also about understanding who they are as an individual. Everyone's different. For some people, exercise can be something that's really helpful. For others, it can actually make stress and anxiety worse. So it's about really understanding, their own triggers and their own remedies and what it is they need. Even if it's like a small walk on the beach, some time out to have some fresh air. Some people love cooking. Some people find it stressful. It's really about understanding what it is as an individual that they need to make themselves feel better.
And this would take a lot of awareness of what your triggers are as well, right?
A lot of awareness. And something that is to do is just to monitor. So what I work with as well is a traffic light system. So I say to people, what does it feel like when you're green? So green's a positive state. I feel relaxed, I'm calm, my breath is slow. How do they really feel there? Amber's maybe my breathing has sped up. I feel maybe a bit sweaty. You know, I can feel a bit anxious. I want to stand up. And, you know, like a red zone would be something like, I can't breathe. My mind is racing.
Yeah.
So it's about also understanding, monitoring the physical symptoms, and then looking around and saying, okay, what happened in that moment when I was in the red zone?
Gotcha.
That's how they can then understand what their triggers are.
And I imagine in order to do all of that, of course, awareness is key. Yeah. And I guess to a certain extent, and I want your take on it as well, do you feel like working on self-criticism or self-judgment in those times can really help, especially if, let's say, you're on the red zone and you are feeling anxious and stressed and so on. But I feel like while you're aware of it, and you are aware of it, but if you were to beat yourself up in that moment, I think that just adds on.
It's
right?
really common, and that's, you know, why I wanted to highlight this aspect of acceptance, because when we don't have acceptance, and what can start to happen is people think, oh, you know, I shouldn't feel this way. It's wrong. I've done something. And, you know, that escalates the situation and definitely makes things a lot worse. And, you know, if you think that a lot of the time we wouldn't accept a certain type of conversation from another person. Yeah. You know, we say things like, don't speak to me like that. I'm not accepting that. These are my boundaries and I'm not accepting that. But we take it from ourselves. Yeah. And it's really hard. It's a hard thing to admit that you're doing. But I think once people can understand and recognize that voice of the inner critic and start to be a bit kinder to themselves, they're going to experience a lot less stress and a lot less anxiety.
That's so true, and I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So before we end this episode today, is there any last words that you would like to share?
Just really to encourage people to just take time out, you know, take time to meditate, take time to be mindful, just to take some time for themselves.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annabel, for being with me here today and sharing your insight and just sharing all these tips. It's such an important topic, and I feel like we've touched base on a lot of important pointers as well. Absolutely. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you. And thank you to all our viewers who are watching and listening and tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode, and I look forward to coming back with another episode with another speaker. Until then, stay safe and live life.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to have you tune in again next week as we discuss more engaging topics on relationships, health, career, self-care, and spirituality. If you'd like to help support this podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave us a rating and review. We'd be extremely grateful. To catch all the latest from us, you can also follow us on Instagram at Illuminations World, or visit the Illuminations World YouTube channel for more inspiring content. See you again next week, and until then, live light.